Do not check your bank account tomorrow morning. Not first thing. Not before you have done the one thing I am going to teach you tonight. I know how strange that sounds, and I know the resistance already rising in you, because checking is the most automatic thing you do. It feels responsible, it feels necessary, it feels like the opposite of denial. But I'm telling you as clearly as I can that the reflexive morning check is one of the most quietly destructive acts in your entire financial life, and almost nobody understands why. And once you do understand why, you will never again look at that number the same careless way. Because there is a specific order of operations that the wealthy follow without even knowing they follow it, and the broke violate every single day without knowing they violate it, and that wrong order, that single reversed sequence, is quietly keeping money away from you no matter how hard you work. The order is this: you set your state first, and you look at the evidence second. The broke do it backwards. They get the order wrong every morning, and the wrong order is the invisible thing standing between them and everything they are trying to manifest. They look at the evidence first, the number, the balance, the cold hard fact, and they let that number set their state for the entire day. And in doing so, they hand the authorship of their reality over to a number that is nothing more than a photograph of a past they are trying to leave. Tonight, I'm going to show you the one thing to do before you look, and why doing it in the wrong order is keeping you exactly where you are. Let me explain what actually happens, neurologically and energetically, in the instant you check that balance. You open the app, and before you have consciously read the number, your nervous system has already reacted. There is a flinch or a sinking or a bracing, a full-bodied response that happens faster than thought, and that response floods your body with a state. If the number is low, and for the person trying to manifest more it almost always feels low, the state that floods you is lack. Pure, immediate physical lack. Your shoulders, your gut, your breath, all of it contracts around the felt sense of not enough. And here is the part that matters more than anything. That state, the one the number just installed in you, is now the state you will carry into the entire day. It is the state from which you will make every decision, write every message, have every conversation, perceive every opportunity. And Neville Goddard taught with total clarity that the state you occupy is the state that creates. So by checking the balance first, before setting your state deliberately, you have allowed a photograph of your past to dictate the state that authors your future. You have let yesterday's number write tomorrow's reality. This is the trap, and it is invisible, and you spring it on yourself every single morning. Understand what that balance actually is. It is not the truth about your wealth. It is not a verdict. It is not a prophecy. It is a record. It is the visible, lagging residue of states you occupied in the past, the frozen shadow of who you have already been. The number in your account this morning was authored by the self you were weeks and months ago, the assumptions you held, the state you lived in back then. It is old news, it is a photograph, and a photograph is always of the past, always, by definition. And yet the broke brain treats this photograph of the past as if it were a live feed of the future, as if it were telling the truth about what is coming, and it lets that photograph dictate its present state, which is the one thing that actually does determine the future. Do you see the insanity of the order? You are letting the recorded past set the creative present that builds the unmade future. You are driving forward while staring into the rearview mirror and letting what you see behind you decide which way to steer. The number is the rearview mirror. It shows where you have been. It was never meant to steer the car. This is why the order of operations is everything. The wealthy, and I mean the genuinely wealthy in state, and not just in circumstance, do something completely different, usually without articulating it. They establish their inner state first, deliberately or by deep habit, before the world gets a chance to set it for them. They walk into the day already being the one who has, already occupying sufficiency, already settled in the felt sense of enough. And then, from inside that established state, they glance at the evidence, the numbers, the circumstances, and crucially, the evidence cannot knock them out of their state, because their state was set before they looked and does not depend on what the number says. If the number is high, fine. If the number is temporarily low, also fine, because the low number is just a lagging photograph of an old self, and they already know who they are now, and it is not that. They look at the evidence from above it, as its author, not from beneath it, as its subject. The broke look at the evidence from beneath it, let it crash down on them, and become its subject for the rest of the day. Same number, opposite relationship. And the relationship, not the number, is what determines what comes next. So here is the one thing to do before you check, and I want you to actually do this tomorrow, not just understand it. Before you reach for the phone, before you look at a single number, you set your state. In the first moments of waking, while you are still in that soft, suggestible, half-dreaming condition, before the world rushes in, you take a few minutes and you deliberately occupy the state of the one who has. You do not picture money. You feel the inner condition of sufficiency. You feel what it is to lie here as someone for whom money is handled, abundant, a non-issue. You feel the relaxation in the body of the one who is not braced, the quiet of the one who has nothing to check, because nothing is threatened. You let that state become real and full and settled in your body, and you hold it until it is the dominant fact of your morning. And only then, from inside that established state, if you must look at all, do you look. And you will find that the number, whatever it is, no longer has the power to install lack in you, because you arrived at it already full, already being the one who has, and a photograph of the past cannot overwrite a state you have deliberately set in the present. Now I have to confront the resistance because I can feel it, and if I do not address it, you will nod along tonight and check the balance first thing tomorrow out of pure habit. The resistance says, but I need to know, I need to be informed. Checking is responsible, not checking is denial, is irresponsible, is sticking my head in the sand, and this is the most convincing lie the broke brain tells. So listen carefully. There is a vast difference between informed action and compulsive checking, and the broke brain uses the first as a cover for the second. You do not need to look at your balance the instant you open your eyes to be a responsible person. The bills do not get paid in the first 30 seconds of waking. There is no decision that must be made before you have even set your state. The morning check is not gathering information for a decision. It is a compulsion, a ritual, a reflexive reaching to confirm the familiar feeling of lack, dressed up as responsibility so that you never question it. You can be completely responsible with your money, pay every bill, make every wise decision, and still never once let the number set your state before you have set it yourself. Informed action happens from an established state, later, deliberately. Compulsive checking happens first, automatically, and lets the evidence author the day. One is freedom. The other is the trap wearing the mask of virtue. Before I take you deeper into what to do across the whole day and not just the morning, I need you to do one thing, because this teaching only works if you actually reverse the order tomorrow, and old habits are strong. In the pinned comment I have placed a short morning practice, a guided version of exactly the state setting I just described, something you can play in the first minutes of waking before you touch your phone, so you do not have to do it from memory while the pull to check is screaming at you. Go there after this video and leave one word below, the word first. Just that word, to mean that tomorrow you will set your state first before you check anything, that you are taking back the order of operations. The ones who comment are the ones who actually do it. Now let me show you why this one reversal, done consistently, quietly changes everything downstream, because the morning is only where it begins. The reason this single reversal is so powerful is that the morning state is not just one state among many. The state you establish in the first minutes of the day has a momentum that colors everything after it. It is the tone the rest of the day tends to follow. Set lack first thing, and you have tuned the entire instrument of your perception to the frequency of lack, and all day long you will notice the evidence of scarcity, find the problems, make the fearful choices, speak from contraction, and miss the openings, because a nervous system in lack literally perceives a world of lack. Set sufficiency first thing, before the number gets to vote and you have tuned the instrument to a different frequency, and all day you will perceive differently, notice openings the anxious self would have missed, make clearer and bolder choices, speak from ease and carry into every room the energy that people unconsciously trust and want to be near. The morning state is the seed state. Everything that grows during the day grows from it. This is why the wealthy guard their morning state so carefully, often without even knowing they are doing it, and why the broke surrender it instantly to a number before they are even fully awake. Whoever sets your morning state authors your day. Make sure it is you, and not a photograph of your past. Now let me extend this beyond the morning, because the bank account is only the most obvious version of a much larger pattern, and once you see the pattern everywhere, you gain real power over your reality. The pattern is this: you are constantly checking the evidence of your life and letting it set your state, and every act of checking is a moment where you either author your state or surrender it. The bank balance is one form of evidence, but there are dozens of others all day, and the broke brain checks them all compulsively and lets every one of them dictate how it feels, and therefore what it creates. You check whether the client replied, and the silence sets a state of rejection. You check the number of sales, the count, the metric, and the low figure sets a state of failure. You check how the wealthy are living, and let the comparison set a state of inadequacy. You check all day, and each check is an invitation for the evidence of your past to overwrite the state you need in order to create a different future. Neville called the visible world the three-dimensional world, the 3D, and he taught that it is a world of effects, not causes. The 3D shows you the printed results of states you held before. To let the 3D set your present state is to let the printout author the next printing, to let the effect become the cause, which is the exact reversal that keeps people locked in the same reality year after year. They keep reacting to the printout, and the printout keeps printing what they react with. This is the deepest thing I want you to understand tonight. The 3D is a record, not a ruler. It is showing you the past, and it has no creative power of its own. The creative power is entirely in your state, in the assumption you hold, in the inner condition you occupy. So when you check the evidence in any form and you let it knock you into lack, you have taken the one thing with creative power, your state, and you have surrendered it to the one thing with no creative power, the record. You have inverted the entire system. The record should be reflecting your state, but instead you have let it dictate your state. And now the two are locked in a loop where the lacking state produces a lacking record, which produces more lacking state, around and around, and the person inside the loop calls it reality and cannot understand why it never changes. It never changes because they keep feeding the printout back in as the input. Break that, and everything moves. And you break it exactly where we started, by setting your state first before you check anything, so that when you do look at the evidence, you look at it as its author, from a state you have already established, and the evidence loses its power to reset you. Let me give you the practice for living this way. Not just in the morning, but throughout the day, because the morning sets the seed, but the day is where the old habit will keep trying to reclaim the order. The practice is simple to state and takes attention to live. Before you check anything that carries an emotional charge, anything that can install a state in you, you pause and you notice that you are about to check, and you ask yourself one question. What state am I in right now, before I look? And if you are not in the state you want to create from, you set it first even for 30 seconds before you look. You establish sufficiency, ease, the felt sense of the one who has, and then you look from there. This means that throughout the day, at every checkpoint, the bank, the messages, the metrics, the comparisons, you are inserting a small act of state setting between the impulse to check and the act of checking. You are refusing to look at any evidence from beneath it. You are training yourself to look at all of it from above it, as its author. And over time, this stops being effortful and becomes who you are. A person who is simply no longer at the mercy of the printout. A person whose state is set from within and merely confirmed, never dictated from without. I want to address what happens when the evidence is genuinely difficult, because I am not asking you to pretend. Sometimes you will set your state, and then you will look, and the number will be hard, the news will be real, the situation will be tight. I am not telling you to deny what is there. Denial is the broke brain's caricature of this teaching, and it does not work, because you cannot build a state on top of a lie you do not believe. What I'm telling you is something more subtle and far more powerful. You can fully acknowledge the fact, the actual number, the actual situation, while refusing to let that fact dictate your state. The fact is true as a record of the past. Your state is about who you are being now, which authors what is coming. These are two different things, and the wealthy mind holds both at once. It says, in effect, yes, this is the current number, I see it clearly, and I am not denying it, and also I am the one who has. The number is a lagging photograph and not a verdict, and I set my state from who I am becoming, not from who the record says I have been. That is not denial, that is authorship. You look the fact full in the face and you decline to let it author you because you have reserved that power for yourself. The fact gets to be true. It does not get to be the boss. And here is the strange and beautiful thing that happens when you live this way for a while. The facts start to change, not because you denied them, but because you stopped feeding them back in as the cause. When you stop letting the low number set a state of lack, the state of lack stops being renewed every morning, and the lacking state was the very thing producing the low number, so the low number loses its source. The printout, no longer fed its own output, begins to print something else. Slowly, the evidence starts to lag behind a new state instead of an old one, and one day you check from your established state of sufficiency, and the number has quietly moved. And it moved because you stopped letting the old number dictate the state that was creating it. This is the whole mechanism, and it turns entirely on the order of operations. State first, evidence second. Author first, record second. Cause first, effect second. Get the order right. Hold it through the difficult days when the printout is still catching up, and the printout has no choice eventually, but to reflect the self you have been steadily, deliberately being, instead of the self you used to be. So let me bring it all the way back to tomorrow morning, to the concrete moment, because everything I have said lives or dies in that first minute of waking. Tomorrow you will wake, and the pull will be there, immediate and strong, to reach for the phone and check, to perform the ritual, to let the number set your state before you are even conscious. And in that moment you will remember this. You will let the phone stay where it is. You will keep your eyes soft, stay in that drowsy, suggestible state for a few minutes, and you will deliberately become the one who has. You will feel the sufficiency, the ease, the unbraced body, the quiet of one for whom money is handled, and you will let that state become the established fact of your morning. And only then, from inside it, if you look at all, you will look as its author. You will reverse the order that has been keeping you locked in place. One morning at a time, you will take back the authorship of your state from a photograph of your past. And as the mornings accumulate, the seed state you plant each day will grow into days that feel different, choices that are bolder, perceptions that are wider, and eventually a printout that has quietly changed to match the self you decided to be before you ever looked at the number. Let me go deeper into why the checking is so compulsive, because you are fighting something stronger than a habit, and if you do not understand its grip, you will lose to it tomorrow morning without even noticing you lost. The compulsive check is not just habit. It is a nervous system seeking certainty in the only place it knows to look, which is the external world, the visible number, the concrete fact. The anxious self cannot tolerate the open uncertainty of not knowing, and so it reaches for the number to resolve the uncertainty, to feel, even for a moment, that it knows where it stands. But here is the cruel trick. The number never actually resolves the anxiety, because the anxiety was never really about the number. It was about a state of lack inside, and the number, being a photograph of that very lack, only confirms and deepens it. So the anxious self checks, feels worse, and then, because it feels worse, feels an even stronger need for certainty, and checks again, and the checking becomes a loop that promises relief and delivers the opposite, the way all compulsions do. The only way out of the loop is not to check harder or find a better number. It is to source your certainty from within, from a state you set deliberately, rather than from the external record. The wealthy mind is certain from the inside, and so it does not need to keep interrogating the outside. The broke mind is uncertain from the inside, and so it interrogates the outside endlessly, and the outside keeps giving it back its own uncertainty in numerical form. And there is a deeper layer still, one that almost no one will admit. The morning check often delivers a strange, dark satisfaction, even when the number is bad. And you need to understand this, or you will keep doing it while believing you do not want to. There is a perverse comfort in confirming the worst, a grim relief in the familiar drop, because at least it is known, at least it matches the story, at least the world is behaving the way the scarcity self predicted. The nervous system would rather be right about disaster than be uncertain about hope. Confirming lack feels safer than risking the vulnerability of expecting more and being wrong. So the morning check becomes a small daily fix of being right about scarcity, a reassurance that the painful story is still intact, and this hidden payoff is part of what makes it so hard to stop. To set your state first before you check is to give up that dark satisfaction, to risk the vulnerability of being the one who has before the evidence agrees, to step out of the safety of confirmed lack into the exposure of unconfirmed sufficiency. That exposure is precisely what the wealthy mind tolerates, and the broke mind flees. Be willing to feel exposed, to be the one who has before the number says so, to give up the grim comfort of confirmed scarcity. That willingness is the doorway. Now I want to talk about the night before, because the morning state is far easier to set if you prepared the ground the night before, and the two practices work together. The state you fall asleep in is the state you tend to wake in, because sleep does not erase your state. It deepens whatever state you carried across the threshold. So if you fall asleep checking, worrying, rehearsing the numbers, replaying the lack, you are not only impressing scarcity into the deeper mind overnight, you are also guaranteeing that you wake already in lack, already primed, so that the morning check feels not like a choice, but like a continuation of the state you slept in. But if you fall asleep deliberately in the state of the one who has in sufficiency, in ease, in the quiet of nothing to check, then you wake already closer to that state, and setting it in the morning is not a battle against an opposite state, but a gentle continuation of the state you carried through the night. This is why the night practice and the morning practice are two halves of one thing. At night, you fall asleep as the one who has impressing sufficiency into the deep mind through the doorway of sleep. In the morning you wake and re-establish that same state before the world can overwrite it, and only then do you look. Bookend your sleep with the state you want to create from, and the hours of the night work for you instead of against you, and the morning check loses most of its power before you have even opened your eyes. Let me make all of this vivid with the contrast between two people waking on the same morning with the same balance, because the number will be identical and their realities will diverge completely. The first person wakes, and before their eyes are fully open, their hand is already reaching for the phone. They open the app, the number appears low, and the drop hits, the gut contracts, the breath shortens, and a state of lack floods the body. From that state they get up, and all day they move as someone who does not have enough. The email they send to a potential client carries beneath the words the faint smell of need, and the client feels it and cools. The opportunity that drifts past is not seen, because a contracted nervous system has narrow perception, and the opening was at the edge of a vision that fear had tunneled. The conversation about a raise or a price or a deal is conducted from a place of pleas and scarcity, and they accept less, ask for less, settle for less, because their state set the ceiling before the conversation began. By evening, they have lived an entire day as a person who lacks, and that day prints into the next record, and the number does not improve, and they check it again, and the loop turns once more. The second person wakes with the same low number waiting in the same app, but they do not reach for the phone. They stay in the soft, drowsy state, and they take a few minutes to become the one who has, to feel sufficiency in the body, to establish ease and quiet, and the settled fact of enough. Only then, fully in that state, do they glance at the number, and the number, the same number that crushed the first person, lands on them differently, because they are above it, its author, and it is merely a lagging photograph of a self they have already left. From that established state they get up, and all day they move as someone for whom money is handled. The email they send carries ease and offering instead of need, and the client leans in. The opportunity at the edge of vision is seen, because an open nervous system has wide perception. The conversation about money is conducted from sufficiency, and they ask cleanly for what they are worth and often get it, because their state set a higher ceiling before a word was spoken. By evening they have lived a day as a person who has, and that day prints into the next record, and slowly, over many such days, the number begins to move. Same balance at dawn, two different lives by dusk, and the entire fork in the road was a single choice made in the first minute of waking, the choice of whether to set the state or let the number set it. That is the power of the order of operations, and that is why I opened by telling you not to check your bank account tomorrow morning until you have done the one thing. The one thing is to set your state, to become the one who has before you look at any evidence of what you have. It is the smallest possible change in behavior, a few minutes, a reversal of sequence, and it is one of the largest possible changes in result, because it changes which self is authoring your day, and the self that authors your day authors your life. You are not being asked to deny reality or to lie to yourself or to pretend the number is different than it is. You are being asked only to change the order, to stop letting a photograph of your past dictate the state that creates your future, to take back every single morning the authorship that was always yours and that you have been unknowingly surrendering to a number before you were even awake enough to choose. I want to leave you with one more reframe, because it will help you on the mornings when the pull to check feels unbearable, when the anxiety insists that not knowing is dangerous and you must look right now. On those mornings, remember this: checking the number before you have set your state does not actually give you control. It feels like control, it feels like staying on top of things, but it is the opposite. It is the moment you hand control away, the moment you let an external record seize the steering wheel of your inner state. The genuine act of control, the powerful one, is the restraint, the choosing not to look until you have established who you are, the person who can sit in the discomfort of not yet knowing, and use those minutes to set their own state, is the one actually in control of their financial reality. The person who must check immediately to soothe the anxiety is the one being controlled by the anxiety, by the number, by the photograph of a past self. So on the hard mornings, when every nerve says, "Look now," recognize that the urge to look is not strength, and the restraint is not weakness. It is exactly reversed. The restraint is the strength, the urge is the surrender. Choose the restraint, set the state, become the one who has, and then from that place of real control, look at the world as its author, rather than its subject. Every morning you win this, you are not just having a better day. You are rewiring one sunrise at a time, the entire relationship between your inner state and your outer wealth, until the day comes when checking the number is simply a calm confirmation of a sufficiency you already knew you carried, rather than a verdict you were terrified to receive. And when that day arrives, and it will, you will understand that nothing about the number ever had to change first. You changed first. You set your state before the world could set it for you morning after morning, until the world ran out of ways to keep you small, and the number, the last to know, finally caught up to the self you had quietly been all along. That is how it always works. The state goes first, and the world, slow and faithful, follows it home. If this reached something real in you, the morning state-setting practice is waiting in the pinned comment. If this reached something real in you, the morning state-setting practice is waiting in the pinned comment, ready to play in the first minutes of waking before the pull to check takes over. Comment the word "first" if you are committing to set your state before you check anything tomorrow, so the version of you who already lives this way, who is no longer ruled by the number, can find you in these comments and know you took the authorship back. And tell me below, what is the first thing you normally check when you wake, and what state does it usually install in you? Because the moment you can name that automatic transaction, you can interrupt it, and interrupting it tomorrow morning is the single most powerful thing you can do for your financial reality. I read every comment. Set your state first. Then, and only then, look.